When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. I'm your moderator, Omar Dunlap, and we have with us Sheikh Ammar Amanet. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Now you're the Imam of the
Islamic Center of Virginia.
Of Virginia, okay, and you studied in Saudi Arabia for
in Mecca, yes.
Numerous years, right? Yeah.
About maybe 12 years, I guess.
MashaAllah. Okay, well, welcome to the show today. We have with us our wonderful studio audience. Assalamu alaikum. And today we're discussing the topic of atheism, which is a disbelief in God or being irreligious, we could say. But without going too far into it, I'm going to hand it over to Sheikh Ammar now for his reflections.
Oh, wow. Okay, mashallah, tabarakallah. Alhamdulillah, salatu wa salam wa rasulullah. All praise belongs to Allah alone. And we ask for His blessing upon the Prophet Muhammad. Atheism technically means the belief that there is no God. And a lot of people today believe that we live in a modern technological world built on science, and that belief in God is somehow contradictory, that it's not rational or modern or scientific. And in fact, science is about not believing what you can physically see. If we only believed what we could physically see, as people say, I don't believe in God because I don't see Him, well, we would never have learned anything in our advanced science, in whether it's in the cosmos, astronomy, physics, chemistry, the microcosm. Most of it is the things that were unknown and invisible to human beings. But science is studying what is available to you and learning from that and coming to conclusions to understand things that are not available to your senses and your normal mind. And so science leads us to understanding big things that exist in this world and how it works that weren't known to people previously. And so it's actually very unscientific to reject something just because you can't see it in front of you. And so how can I prove there is no God? It's impossible. There is no scientific or rational way to say there is no God. It's like saying, can I prove there is no planet in some part of the universe with a creature on it? How could I prove that? You can't prove something that is a negative. Nowhere in the universe are there little green men. How do I know that? And of course, you couldn't prove that. So what atheism really is confusion in the minds of people today. They've been told we live in a scientific era, but they themselves don't have clear concepts and reason that can lead them to the knowledge of God, of Allah Almighty. And so what they really are, maybe, is full of doubts. And the Quran addresses that very clearly. Afillahi shak. Is there a doubt? Can there be a doubt about Allah? And that is because the belief in God is universal in every culture, in every era. The vast majority of people, from infancy, childhood, have an innate faith in God and a desire to understand and search for Allah Almighty, to search for our purpose as human beings on earth. What is the meaning of our life? Why did God bring us about here to the earth? So in fact, we're just confused. We've been told about the material universe that everything is what we can see, when in fact, I believe, for example, there's a president in Washington, D.C. named Barack Obama. I never met, but I believe he exists there. There was a president named George Washington. I believe that. I never met him or anybody who ever met him or knew him. And so we follow evidence. And so faith in Islam It doesn't mean you believe in just an idea without proof or evidence. But in fact, it's like if you, for example, if you're a detective and there's a crime, how many crimes would be solved? If I was the police and I arrive and there is been a murder and the murderer says, yes, I'm the murderer, I confess. Or you immediately go to the scene and there are hundreds of eyewitnesses and proof. No. You have to find many different evidences from different places and put them all together and use your reason and intelligence, and it will lead you eventually to the understanding of the crime and who committed the crime. And so faith comes in Islam. It's knowledge. Knowledge in your heart that leads you to clear understanding of the world and then acting on that knowledge. And so we don't ask people to just blindly believe in something, but follow the evidence and proof all around you. And so Allah says that the ayat, the revelations of God, are in the horizons, that is in the heavens and earth, and within yourself. This is called in the Quran your fitrah, upon which Allah has created the human being. And the Prophet Muhammad, in the authentic hadith, narrates from Allah Almighty that He created all of us as His servants, as hunafa muslimin, that we are created believing in God and in Allah's oneness and in submission and surrender as Muslims to Allah Almighty. And so we can find within ourselves, if we will examine ourselves, our creation, and consult our conscience, that it will lead us to Allah and to knowledge of truth and what is good and what is evil. And so one of the best indicators also is within the history and with the masses of human beings. That since Allah created us as Muslims in a state of knowledge of God, that belief in God is universal in all times and places among all human beings and cultures, education levels, races, nations, every time and place. And so it is the minority of people who have totally rejected God completely. Yes, they get things wrong and they innovate in forms of worship, or they may worship other beings also along with God. But it is the essence of humanity to seek God and to worship God, Allah Almighty. One thing is that Allah sent the prophets and messengers to every nation and revealed the scriptures to them, as He states in the Quran, that all of us were all in one original, one nation, one religion. And then we divided and hated one another. And so Allah sent the prophets and revealed the scriptures to judge justly among us. And so it is the scriptures and the revelation of the prophets that are the foundation of every civilization, that we can live together in peace and have justice and fairness. Otherwise, we would not have been able to become civilized and advance as human beings. And so it's the foundation of what we call the moral law that is one of the indications of human beings. There's no culture, no religion, no system of laws that says, for example, oppression and wrongdoing is good, and being a good person, that's bad. And so every nation, even dictatorships, they say, oh, we believe in freedom and justice and fairness, even though they don't actually do it. And so that is an indication of the universality of Allah's revelation to humanity, that these ideas didn't just evolve and develop, but they are universal among all of us. And so if we will look to natural law in the heavens, in the earth, in all the creatures, to our own psychology and moral makeup, and look to the history of humanity and its sociology and its development, we will see that it will lead us to the knowledge of our common origin of Allah Almighty. Everything that we value, that we think is really good, it is ultimately from God Almighty. Every power, every value that is ultimately solving my problems, what I really want in the world, it is from God, and that will strengthen our faith. And so it's not really necessarily a problem of atheism, but for the majority of people it's confusion and a lack of knowledge that leads them to doubt about things where there is no doubt. And as the Quran said. And so the Quran was revealed to people who knew in their hearts there was a God, but they were very confused about how to worship Him and directing what belongs to God to the improper directions to other beings rather than Allah. But as Allah said in the Quran, when you're really in trouble, the human beings call upon God very sincerely. And so I believe that ultimately every human being can find the answer to the question of God's existence if they really sincerely want to know.
Very good. Well, it was very interesting. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back, inshallah. So don't go anywhere. You're watching Let's Talk.
Inshallah, on the straight path, we would like to discuss the niqab from an Islamic and social political perspective.
So sometimes some non-Muslims, they might not understand the full Islamic pictures. Anyone can say anything about it.
Yes.
So when can who speaks for Islam? This is the biggest question. Who speaks for Islam? No, they are not sinning. They are not sinning, but we are talking about now the general ruling. They are not sinning, but they are going against what has been established. It is his own ijtihad at a specific time.
People would see it as
Threat.
a threat.
Exactly.
How do we explain to them it's not really a threat, it's actually good for the country as well? But if we don't participate, how would we ever reach to our rights? Can you clarify with us what should be the level of political participation of the Muslims in the West?
Yeah.
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Today we're discussing the topic of atheism. We have with us Sheikh Omar Amanet. Sheikh, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you some questions after we go to some questions that we've already asked some of our Muslim brothers and sisters. We asked them, why are people losing faith? And how are we to give da'wah to atheists? So we're going to take a look at their questions, and then we'll come back and I'll have some questions of my own, inshallah.
Nowadays, I think people lose faith in Allah due to many reasons, amongst which is our little knowledge, our little faith, the little faith that they have. Because many people nowadays, instead of having been well prepared with a full and faith from their beginning, from their parents, so they have little belief in Allah. So by doing this, they may be confused by the other non-Muslims. So they have their belief is somehow is not well, is below under the expectation. So I think another reason is that many people we do not focus our attention on searching for knowledge. We have little knowledge because the one who have knowledge in Allah, who has knowledge in Allah, will automatically believe in Him and fear Him, and he will worship Him. So and I think another reason is that we are very bad in the where we are talking of practical aspect, because we have belief, but we do not practice what we are our religion. So that is why we can see Muslims are in almost everywhere. So we just see them that they are Muslims by names, but in the practical aspect, they are very bad.
Well, I think Muslims these days, they feel that they are not being helped and they have less faith, very less faith. Because, faith is something that somebody has on his or her own. It is not something that you go to the market to buy. You have to believe that you are created by Almighty Allah. And you have to believe that all that you have here on earth belongs to Almighty Allah. You should respect your religion. You should know that even if you die now, Almighty Allah will judge you. So the responsibility of your own affair between you and God doesn't lie to anybody's hand. You have the responsibility of taking care of your religion. So those who actually lose their religion, I think they should remember that the world will never go back to where it was during the time of the Prophet. Now we do have people who are Muslim scholars. They also try to call to Islam. And those people, they do efforts. It's only effort. They are not being paid. They are just making effort in order to help the Muslim community. So the issue of faith is in the Muslim himself or herself. So he has to understand that whatever he does is between him and Almighty Allah. So nobody takes the responsibility of, if he doesn't actually embrace Islam according to the way he should, or if he doesn't worship God according to the way he should. So, but on the whole, I think we should also try to help each other.
Bismillah. Well, that was very interesting. Before we go to the questions in the audience, I kind of want to reiterate those questions to you. Why do you think people are losing faith these days?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. People don't see that, for example, as Muslims, they don't see the success in the Islamic world that they see in some other civilizations that are perhaps, not religious. And so they see that people who have no faith or are not religious are very successful, and they want that. And they're told that there's so much wealth available. We're in a materialistic world, and they see that the people who love the materialistic world are the most successful in that world. And so they think there's a choice between getting what you want in this world and getting it in heaven. And so you have to, if you want this world, you're not going to get what's in heaven, or vice versa. So there are a lot of things that are, make it difficult for people today in reality. And so we're living in a time where it's very trying and testing for many people.
Very good. Well, we're going to take it to the audience now and see if they have any questions. Go ahead.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu ala rasulillah. In the beginning, I want to thank Brother Omar and Sheikh Ammar for this interesting discussion point. In fact, people in the West, they are, to some extent, they are rationalists. They believe in what they see, what's in front of their eyes. So, Sheikh, in America, when you invite somebody to Islam, how can you deal with him from his perspective?
Well, there's not like one solution to this, but there are a lot of ways of using reason to arrive at a belief in God. And people have actually written and talked about that for thousands of years. We've always had atheists, and we've always had people who had doubts. One thing is, you say you don't believe in God because you don't see any proof of God. Okay, well, if there are some things that we can prove, or that you as a person believe are true and real, but aren't physical and aren't material, then that is a good evidence of Allah, of God. So, for example, do you believe in good and evil? There is, in this earth, there's no such thing as good and evil. We see particular things, and we feel in our heart those are good or those are evil. But is there something that's good and evil? Or is that just something that is from your culture or your development, and different people have different ideas? And so most people will say, yes, I believe in good and evil. I believe there's such things that are absolutely evil, and some things are absolutely good. But that's not a physical or material thing. That's a concept which is basically not from this world. That means it's part of Allah's characteristics in making this world, that He made these values, good and evil, right and wrong, which are eternal. And so every religion, every culture, everybody within their heart, they know certain things are wrong and certain things are right. And they believe that good is something positive and evil is negative. And so I think that's an indication that there is a source which is not physical and part of this world.
Very interesting. Do we have another question? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to ask about something very confusing for me. There are atheists who are very intelligent, genius, and I think they can easily reach the truth, discover the truth that Allah exists. Do you think that they are only satisfying their vanity, their pride, or God doesn't want to guide them?
Allah Almighty ultimately guides whomever He wills. But Allah is not unjust and unfair to anyone. And so those people who are sincere and humble in their hearts, Allah is going to guide them, insha'Allah, by His will. But a lot of people become very, as you said, self-satisfied and arrogant. And we don't acknowledge the limits of our mind. Even if you're a genius, your mind cannot encompass the whole universe and every truth in it. Let alone can your mind encompass Allah Almighty. And so Allah can't guide you if you don't have any humility. You can't learn anything. And even if you are the greatest genius, if you don't have humility, you can't learn any subject. Because it takes, before you can learn, you have to acknowledge what you don't know. And so a truthful person would say, I don't know about God or whether He exists. I need to study and learn and be open to look. But a person who says, I know there's no God, is simply an arrogant fool. That is not intelligent or rational.
Very good. Go ahead.
Assalamu
Alaikum.
I'm really interested in this topic, but my question is, what are the characteristics of a caller to Islam?
Oh, mashallah. Of course, that's not exactly from this topic, but it is very relevant. And just to say a couple of them, calling to Islam, it's not about your own ego. It's calling to Allah. And you have to be doing it for Allah's sake. A lot of people are more interested in proving things to other people and getting some satisfaction. You have to not, as the Prophet, you have to not try to prove you're the right one and they're the wrong one. But you have your own sins and dhunub that you've committed. You've done your own mistakes. And you have to have rahmah for that person, just as, mercy for that person and love for humanity, just as the Prophet did, who was sent as mercy to all the world and to all the people in the world. And so you have to do it out of love for humanity, not arrogance of yourself and your own egotistical desire. You can't guide anybody. You can't prove anything to anybody. It's Allah who guides whomever He wills.
Do we have another question? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My question is about an atheist argument. And please don't take me wrong, I believe in Allah, the one true God. But I just want to know how to refute this argument. You have just said that it doesn't make sense that you don't believe in God just because you don't see Him. Mm-hmm. And the atheist argument is that it's not the problem is not that you can't see Him. The problem is that you can't measure Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, for example, if you are praying to have something, for example, if you are ill and you are praying to get recovered, and you didn't get recovered, or someone has passed away, so this is because of his destiny. So it doesn't make sense for them. That I'm not sure if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Inshallah, you can't necessarily subject God to tests and trials. You can't put Him under a microscope, nor can you reach Him with a telescope or measure Him with human characteristics. And of course, that's because we're talking about what is infinite, and we're part of a finite universe, of course. But it's not true that the only things we know are those things that we can measure. And so, for example, most scientists today believe in the Big Bang. That is, everything in the world comes back to a point of origin, basically a mathematical point of what is infinitely small and infinitely dense. And so when science goes back and back to the beginning of this world, this universe as we know it, we're going to the limit of our ability to know anything. And so, but we still believe in that point, and that all the world came from that origin, even though we can't measure it, because it's infinite. It's beyond our ability to measure it, because it came by reason. And so reason, with the mind, is the most powerful, device in the entire universe. You can understand things with reason that can't be measured. If we waited to be able to measure something, we would never have been able to believe in it, anything or understand it. And so I don't think that is really a sound argument. Yani Allah knows best.
Do we have another question? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Sheikh, you said that existence of God is something which is indisputable among wise people. But the reality is that we have many atheists, even among scientists and professors. So my question is, are there any other reasons that prevent atheists from admitting the existence of God?
Yeah. MashaAllah, atheism is fashionable amongst some of the intellectuals. But there are also very many intellectuals and scientists who are religious, believing in Islam or other religions, or believing in God. And there are many well-known examples today as well as in the past. But when I'm part of, for example, I'm part of the elite in a society, I want to imitate, or if I want to join the elite in a society or a group, I want to imitate them and join them. And so you will follow their fashions and mimic their words. And so I sincerely believe in the future it will be common knowledge. The existence of God will be commonly acknowledged among scientists and intellectuals. But we're in a particular era where that's fashionable. And so you found out, for example, let me give you one limited example. In the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe during communist times, the state was officially atheist. And all the intellectuals were officially atheists. And so they all repeated that. Suddenly, overnight, the state collapsed. Now they all went back to church or mosque. They became Christian and Muslim overnight. So who was actually telling the truth at that time? They were not being sincere. They were pretending and joining in something. And maybe they actually believed it until that collapsed. They no longer believed it. And they returned to their previous religions very often.
Do we have another question for the Sheikh? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thanks for opening this topic for discussion. And I'd like to know what's the difference between calling a Christian and an atheist to Islam.
MashaAllah, there are differences between Christians or people of other religions and atheists, and therefore, obviously, in da'wah, which is the Muslim invitation, Islamic invitation, you have to present to people what is useful for them at that subject. And so if you're talking to people who already believe in God, what you have to do is clarify the concept of God. That is, that God is not like humanity. He doesn't have the imperfections or negativity of human beings, and you cannot worship or a human being or raise them up above the level of God. So people venerate Christ as God. But if you can see Christ as a human being going and eating food and drinking water and buying and selling, of course that cannot be the infinite God who creates everything and provides all of our food and drink and does not need anything. And so that is how you have to talk to a person who believes in God but has a confused concept. While an atheist is a person, you have to lead him to the foundation of faith, of belief in God. And that as human beings, it's essential for us to believe. Do you want to, let me give you something that people say. I can't believe in a God who would allow evil to exist in the world. Wars and innocent babies are killed and slaughtered by millions. And evil people are rich and successful and happy. So that's exactly why you have to believe in God. There's no justice in the world. Allah put in your heart, in your fitrah, the desire for justice. And so there must be a resurrection and a judgment where the evil will be punished and where the good will be rewarded for their patience. So one moment in paradise, you will forget about all the suffering you had. And one moment in hell, they will forget about all of the blessing they had in this world. And so that's actually a good proof of God for those people, inshallah.
Very good. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back, inshallah. So don't go anywhere. You're watching Let's Talk.
Hajj in the Quran. Hajj is the fifth pillar of Islam and one of the most important acts of worship for Muslims.
The journey of Hajj is a clear practice to the believers so that they come back from the journey of Hajj with the pillar of Islam being perfected. Almost every place on the face of earth, every corner of the world, you would have a representative of that place coming to Hajj. From the east and the west and from north and south, every single race you would find in the journey of Hajj. Nothing would be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless we follow the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in every major and minor thing. From all corner of the world. And this is the sign that everybody's coming for the same cause, for the same purpose. They're all united, going to Hajj for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the first place of worship, the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Mecca, blessed and guidance to all mankind and all that exists. Complete the Hajj and the Umrah. Lillah, meaning for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone.
Join Sheikh Ibrahim Zidan as he examines the meaning, wisdom, and essence of Hajj by examining its relevance in the Quran.
Huda, a light in every home.
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Let's Talk. I'm your moderator, Omar Dunlap, and today we're discussing the topic of atheism. We have with us in the studio Sheikh Omar Manet, and we have our guest Yamin Daniels. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you two doing today? Good? Alhamdulillah? Good, very good. Sheikh, I've been wanting to ask you many questions, but we haven't had time in the past segments, but now's my chance. Now I get to ask you everything I've wanted to ask you. The first thing I want to discuss is the topic of science. You know, we find many atheists in the field of science, or else they kind of replace, for lack of a better term, religion with science. Can we use science to prove the existence of God, or at least show us some evidence?
Well, without doubt, you can show evidence with science and with reason. But one problem is today, science, as you said, has sort of taken a religious overtone to a lot of people. And they worship this thing called science, which they don't actually practice or understand. And so, you know, you can be a scientist, but to be a scientist today means you have very, very narrow focus on particular area. You can't study everything in depth. And so you may be very overconfident in your understanding of a lot of other issues in the world. And that's a problem today, is there's a very important principle in Islamic belief, which is we don't really understand as many things as we think. And if you just think about yourself, how many things you thought you knew in the past, and then you learned better. And probably, looking to the future, you're going to change your opinions. And so if you're a scientist, then it's been a process for you of doubts and understanding, gathering evidence and proofs, and then refining your knowledge and adding to your knowledge. And so if you're a scientist, you should still be open that there's knowledge you have not reached yet. And so I think that science itself, and the fact that if this universe came out of nothing, for no purpose, it's just there, why would this little insignificant insect on this little insignificant planet in the middle of the, not even the middle, in the dark edge of the universe somewhere, be able with this piece of of skin inside of their head, be able to comprehend principles of the whole universe, where the universe came from, where it's going to, and minute things about the whole structure of the world. How would that even be possible? Wouldn't it be a waste that the whole universe came and then this little creature for no particular purpose can, among everybody in the universe, comprehend all of that knowledge? That by itself should indicate that there is some purpose in our being here that is bigger than this material and physical world.
Yeah, it's interesting that you make that point, because I was actually watching a documentary on the universe. It was made by, I think, the Learning Channel in America. I was watching it a while back, and one of the things they said, the scientists were blown away by the fact that the laws that govern the universe, you know, how gravity works and the whole E equals mc squared and all that, they said, what's amazing to me is that we can understand it. Like, there's no logical reason that I should be able to understand this.
Yeah.
You know, how does it work? But it's very simple.
Yeah,
I get it, you know.
I'm sorry. Why would an ant need to know more than what an ant needs to know to do what he does?
Right.
And why would a giraffe or any other creature, yet this human being? And so, what you see, you don't really see with your eyes. It's with your brain. What you hear, it's with your ears. It's not really. I mean, it's in your brain. It's not with your ears. What you understand, it's eternal to you. It's internal in your mind. And so, within your mind, you have built-in tools to comprehend the origin and structure of the universe in the cosmos, the macrocosm and microcosm, the smallest part of the universe. SubhanAllah.
Yeah.
Glory be to Allah.
Yes.
How is that possible, and what significance could there be if that were just a materialistic universe?
MashaAllah. Brother Yameen, you're like me. We're fellow Muslim converts or reverts, or however they're saying it saying it these days. So surely you've had contact, or at least with non-Muslims. You've probably been engaged in dawah at some point in your life. Have you ever come in contact with atheists?
Actually, I have. When I was in the military, I used to work in the brig, and at one point we had a devil worshipper, and he had his satanic Bible, and we had an atheist there also, and. The thing about science came up, and about people not having religion. Whenever you're born, children don't have religion. We give them religion, and this is one of their ideologies. But I spoke to him. I used to tell him about Ibn Hazm. I don't know if you remember him. He's the father of optometry. The study of the eye. And he was a Muslim, and he used Islamic knowledge to gain his concepts in the medicine or the science of the eye today is still used from his concepts that he made. And other concepts, other scientific researches are based on his concepts of research also.
So you would say maybe an effective method of dawah for an atheist then would be to use science and this sort of thing?
I think if you have knowledge of science, then yes. I think you could use it to prove to them, yes. That,
whatever tools are...
Could I add one little thing that he said? And that is, a lot of people say the same thing that he was told, that as children we have no religion, but we're given that by our parents. But actually, when psychologists have studied children in the right atmosphere, in the right environment, looking for it, they find out that the very young children, as soon as they're able to express themselves, have a faith and belief in God and in life after death. It's the society that actually educates religion out of them. It's not it's the other way around. And so very small children, their pet dies or is suddenly killed. They say, oh, he's not really dead. His body is dead, but really his spirit, they believe, somehow is with God or with Allah in some way. It's something innate and that children have that is actually removed from them in society.
You can look in any sociology textbook and they will tell you that human beings need religion. We don't know why it is, but psychologically speaking, from our studies in these areas, there's something in us that tells us we need a religion. And if we don't have a religion, we replace it with something else. For example, science or some hobby or something, and then that becomes our forefront. But overall, the point is we need some sort of belief.
We need what you would call a transcendent meaning. That is, a meaning or value of something that gives us a purpose that is not physical in this world. And so, for example, we need food and water. Without doubt, there's food and water in this world. That's why we have a need for it. If you could imagine an alien came from an alien world, and they had a hunger or thirst for something that we don't have in this planet, we would believe and know for sure that it exists in the place where that creature is from. And so this internal need, innate need, is for God, or the transcendent. That is something that is eternal and beyond this world.
I want to mention something interesting. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you said. You know, the answer is in the Quran. وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And this explains, and it means, and I've not created mankind and jinn except that they should worship me. And this is the reason why we have this inclination to worship something. And it should be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
MashaAllah. Sheikh Omar, what about faith, blind faith versus Iman? Is that what Iman means? Because sometimes the Muslim concept of Iman is translated as the word faith. What's going on with that?
Well, of course, Iman is from the word, amin, which is what is secure. And so it is knowledge, secure knowledge, trust. Trust in your knowledge, and then acting upon it. So faith produces, it's knowledge that produces change in your behavior, in your decisions, in your words, and in your deeds. And so faith isn't something that is like a blind leap, as they say, a leap of faith. But it means trusting, like we said before, this universe, we have the ability, with the blessing of our mind and intelligence, and with our inner nature, to understand the purpose of our life given to us by Allah. Then we have to trust in that. And without that fundamental trust in Allah, and then acting upon that, we wouldn't have real faith.
Very interesting. Yamin, if you ever came across an atheist and he said to you, "Prove to me that Islam is true," what would you say to him?
Wow. First of all, I wouldn't get into a conversation with him about proving. I think that I would just try to establish the proofs that, or establish the facts that Allah is one and that Muhammad is his messenger. And he would take this knowledge with him, or he would leave it. But Yom Qiyamah, it would be established that someone told him, and he was informed that, Islam is the truth.
Sheikh Omar, how can we prove to somebody, I mean, barring aside any psychological barriers, if someone's very open and he says, "I just want to see some evidence that Islam is the right way," what would we say?
Well, I like what the brother Yamin said, but somebody might understand that he means that you just tell him, Allah says in the Quran, and the Prophet Muhammad said, and that's not what it means to convey the message, because Allah conveyed evidence and proof, and so the person hasn't heard the message until they have heard enough that would be sufficient for them to understand and make up their mind. Otherwise, you can go, quote the Quran, and then they're supposed to believe, and that's what people, or they quote the Bible. Now you have to believe it. It says that in the Bible, and that's not what it really means. But the evidence is that you have to tell people is look into your heart. Look at this evidence in science and the origin of the universe. Would you rather live in a society where people believed that God was watching them, taking account of their deeds, and going to judge them and reward them based on whether they were good or evil, whether they are liars and cheaters and murderers or not? Or would you like to live in a society where everybody thinks that nobody is watching, nobody is taking account, and whether you're good or evil, in the end it will make no difference at all? Which society would you rather live in? I would rather live personally among people who had a strong faith in God and the idea of judgment and reward for their deeds, rather than the society that was purely materialistic and atheist.
I want to come to another point. I want to ask you another question really quick. Because when I was in the States, I did some, would give some talks from time to time. I guess because just I'm a native English speaker that's also a Muslim, so they valued that for whatever reason. And so I would give some talks at universities and things about Islam. And one of the talks I gave was dealing with this topic of evolution and atheism and so on. And after the talk, someone came up to me and he said, I'm an atheist, but by the way, I don't believe in evolution. Because the whole talk was about evolution. So he said, well, I don't believe in evolution. And I didn't really take it much farther than that. I was kind of running short on time. But what would we say to somebody that's in that position then? I don't believe in the scientific explanation of why we're here, but I don't believe in God.
Yeah. Well, of course, in previous times, people didn't believe in God, and obviously they didn't believe in evolution. They believed the world was eternal, it always had existed, and always will exist. And so that was a different belief. Obviously, we know that's not true today. We have scientific evidence that the world came into being, was created, or came into existence when it had not previously existed, and not in the meaning of what we understand as existence today. And so that's really, not a rational position to hold. It would be really impossible that the world came into existence from nothing without the great, as they would say, the original cause, as they say in philosophy. Something had to cause. When there was nothing, there had to have been something, and that, of course, was Allah.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of websites and things involved in dawah and films and things that we've done. Even we have this channel here that's involved in dawah. But it seems like most of it is geared towards Christians. This is my opinion, but I'm asking you for another take. Do you think that there's enough dawah-related material that focuses on atheism and evolution?
Well, after today, I would definitely say no. And one reason is because even myself, whenever I thought about dawah to maybe like Jewish people or Christian people or something like this. And that's mostly the direction that I would myself would be giving dawah from. But giving dawah to an atheist, I never really thought about it before. And I never actually studied atheism where I could have a background to be able to reach out and try to talk to them about it.
Yeah, I think that's the point. Like, I have a whole list of Bible verses in my mind that I could rattle off if I'm talking to a Christian. But do we have quotes from evolutionists and things memorized that we could give them? And we don't really have that resource. What do you think?
It's out of a lot of our comfort zones because we assume, naively that everybody thinks the way we do and is from the same background. And there are millions of people who, for example, in nominally Christian countries who are not Christian and have no idea of the Bible and never read it and have no interest in it. And, of course, the majority of people in the world aren't Christians or Muslims or Jews. And even though they may not necessarily be atheists, you have to approach every human being with something. You have to be able to give something. And there is something in the Quran and the Sunnah for every possible category of people.
That's very interesting. Actually, I heard a story on that topic just because I find it amusing that a Muslim had actually given a copy of the Quran to a friend of his. He was trying to give some dawah to him, non-Muslim. And the man read the Quran and he gave it back and he said, "That was an interesting book. By the way, was Muhammad a sailor?" And he said, "A sailor? What?" And he said, "Well, the descriptions of the waves, he had to have been a sailor to see that." And the guy was like, "No, he's not a sailor." So it's interesting that there's something in the Quran for everybody.
Well, really, a lot of the verses in the Quran were contradictory to what was thought about the world at that time, the science of that world, of that time. And so they thought, well, the Quran is wrong because it doesn't understand how the world works. And actually, it turned out it was right all along.
Right, yeah. We have about a minute left, and I'm going to direct this question to whichever of you wants to answer it. We know there are a lot of Muslim scientists in the world today. For example, we have that one brother, I think he was of maybe Pakistani or Indian descent, that he won the Nobel Prize I forget his name, but hopefully if he's watching, he'll forgive me. But so we have a lot of them in this field, and they have the knowledge to be able to give something back to this deen and create these sort of dawah resources for atheists. Are they doing enough, and how can they do more?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's very difficult to say if they're doing enough unless you would see some material that they've produced that directs their work or connects their work to religion or to the Quran or to the Sunnah or something like this. So I think that's a very difficult question to answer with proof. But just from thinking myself, I would say no. I would say no.
Sheikh Omar, how can the Muslim scientists do more? What can they be doing?
Well, it's a duty for all of us, and you're not doing enough until you see that you're doing as much as you can do, depending on your resources. So we shouldn't be judgmental of people who maybe have limited resources, but especially the scientific and educated leadership of the Muslim world do have a big responsibility. We do need to raise the quality of material available to us that address a lot of issues of science. We have some good stuff, but we don't really have nearly enough tools to use.
We need to become more familiar with it, I think.
Oh, I definitely, without doubt.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back, so don't go anywhere. You're watching Let's Talk.
Reviewing the second rule of al-mim as-sakinah. That is the letter mim. So if the first mim is non-vowel or sakinah, followed by a voweled mim. So I will merge the first in the letter and I will pronounce them as one. وَآمَنَهُمْ مِنْ. And we spoke abundantly on the virtues of seeking refuge with Allah from the outcast Satan. Especially for the first reciter, he's got to recite it out loud.
وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
فإذا جاءت الصاخة.
وَإِذَا النُّفُوسُ زُوِّجَتْ.
Make sure it's Dhamma. وَإِذَا النُّفُوسُ. Thank you for joining us.
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum, welcome back to today's episode of Let's Talk. I'm your moderator, Omar Dunlap, and we're discussing the topic of atheism. And it's been a very interesting show, so I hope you've been able to tune into the whole thing. We have with us Sheikh Omar Amanet and Brother Yamin Daniels is our very special guest. By the way, I want to mention this. You might recognize Brother Yamin's voice. He does a lot of the voice over stuff for us here at Huda. So this is the man behind the voice here, if you're ever wondering. In this section, we're going to take some questions for our audience. I think we have one or two questions. Go ahead.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, and may Allah's peace and blessings be upon His slave and message Muhammad. Then, really, the atheists or the non-Muslims in general are in aghafla or in a dilemma. They have misguided the right path to Islam. So we have to deal with them in a sympathetic way in order to convince them to embrace Islam, inshallah. What's your comment, Sheikh?
Oh, mashallah, barakallah feek. Of course, you have to have a feeling of rahmah, of love and mercy for human beings. And so, as the Prophet said, peace and blessing be upon him, what would become of you, human being, if Allah didn't put love or mercy in your heart? And so, when you see people, if you saw a person who was dying or sick, you would feel compassion for that person. If you see a person who is lost and starving, and you would want to help that person. So if you see people who are suffering from this misguidance and straying away, and you know that harm, spiritual harm, is going to happen to them, you should feel compassion for them. Therefore, you shouldn't be harsh and hard-hearted. But as Allah said to the Prophet Muhammad, if you had been fadan ghalid, if you had been harsh and hard-hearted people, they would have abandoned you and left you. They wouldn't have stuck by you. And so you need to be soft in your manner, kind and merciful toward your fellow human beings, inshallah. Mercy is a beloved attribute. It is a good indicator that you will have the mercy of Allah Almighty if you have mercy for human beings.
MashaAllah. Do we have another question?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Yes, most atheists believe in evolution. I would like to ask, what's evolution's place in Islam?
Oh, do we have enough time for that one?
That's too huge. But let me just put it, I don't say, because these words mean different things to different people, and so I don't comment on that particular word or term or what it means. The Quran and Sunnah tell us clearly that Allah, that God Almighty, is the source of everything, who created everything in this world. How He creates it and how He brings about, we will never know 100%. We will have clues and indications. So we try to gather information about how the world works, but that doesn't mean that we're always going to understand it. And so some of the things that people have based their theories on may be proven in the future not to be entirely accurate. So I don't like to say about the whole theory and everything about it. Some aspects of evolution are without doubt. That, for example, the horses we have today aren't the same as they were. The dog breeds we have today, they're not the same as dog breeds were. They've changed, and gradually over time, all that is the creation of Allah.
And as a Muslim, we have no problem
We have no problem with understanding that. But there are many things that we don't understand clearly. And so if you just say evolution, people don't, they think evolution, that means humans used to be monkeys. They don't understand all the details about that. So what we should tell them instead is, everything is created by Allah. That's what you have to believe. How did Allah make people and all those? That's something that, we can't perhaps know.
Okay, I want to wrap up this show with asking, if you guys know of any books or anything for somebody that's interested to learn more about atheism. Me personally, I know of two. I know that a good book that I would direct an atheist to look at would be The Bible, the Quran, and Science by Dr. Maurice Bukai. I don't know if either of you have heard of that.
I think everybody's probably heard of that.
Very interesting book. And then Harun Yahya has an interesting book called The Evolution Deceit. I don't know about some of his other works, but this particular book, it seems to be dealing with a specified topic. You can give your input on that particular book.
I mean, I think a lot of scientists would dispute some of the things in the second person in some of the things he said.
Okay.
And Islamically, some people would dispute the first book that you said. But all those books have some good in them. Yeah. And everything has some good in them. So use filters. Yeah, use filters. Definitely take things with a grain of salt. Be a little bit skeptical. The Quran is ultimately the best. And Allah talked to every kind of person, including atheists, clearly in the Quran. And I think that is ultimately going to be the best recommendation. Maybe you might have something else.
No. Basically, my source for everything will be the Quran and the Sunnah.
There's so many sources on the internet.
So maybe we could look at these things with new eyes. If we're thinking about doing dawah to atheists, let's reinvestigate Quran and Sunnah with that in mind. Yes. Is that good advice?
That's excellent advice.
Okay, very good. I think that's a good place to end the show, unless we have any more questions. No more questions? Okay. Well, that's all the time we have for today, so I guess it's good that we didn't have any questions. We hope to see you next time, inshallah ta'ala. Until then, I'm your moderator, Omar Dunlap, wishing you peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds